to the Center for Diversity Leadership, where we are supporting school leaders together across the nation as they create school cultures that ensure all students are seen, valued, celebrated, and heard. I am Dr. Ryan Daniel.
And Dr. Edgardo Castro.
And we are your fellows in this work. Every student in my classroom deserves an equal chance despite their differences. What can we do as school leaders to ensure that? Today, we are diving into how school leaders can create a common language of what equity looks and feels like. Equity in education is a process of reforming practices, policies, and procedures at the school and district levels to support academic fairness and inclusion. This ensures every child has everything they need to be successful, like resources, teachers, and interventions. Equity and equality are different, Edgardo. Equality is providing the same opportunities to all students. Equity is giving specific resources and support to disadvantaged students to bring them up to the same opportunity level as their peers. Edgardo, I think about this a lot of times that, students come to us at different levels. Students come to us with different backgrounds. And this one-size-fits-all approach, it just does not work. For me, equity in education is important. I think about the picture that we all know of the equality and equity with the students watching the baseball game, and every student is different sizes, and they each get a box. Well, that doesn't help the student that is shorter than everyone else or the student that is wider. Then you think about the change of it, where every student gets the number of boxes they need to be able to see over the fence. Then I've seen a new one where they take the fence away altogether. And so, Edgardo, for you, and your lens has shifted a little bit now at the district level. Why is equity in education so important to you?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So equity in education is crucial, and it's really, as a leader, principals need to really deep dive in understanding that not all kids, every single one of them in the building, they come from a different background, different levels of understanding, literacy, math, and science and math. And so and I'm glad you mentioned about that picture about they take off the fence altogether. And I think that's to provide really that all students have this, again, not equal is not fairly means that you're providing them with an equity, because they are completely different. And I think the point that every leader needs to really understand is that equity has its own purpose, and understanding that one size fits all, you mentioned that really does not take that method or strategy. It really a layer of support, and that every student, whether if a student is gifted, they still have needs support. Like, for example, again, a social emotional support and that's need to be given. An ELL, like myself, English language learner. So I come from a country that, we have different levels of classes, where when I was a student, my PK 12, I did not go to preschool. I went straight up to first grade. And my memories of that is really that the well-off, the richest in the country, the Philippines, they have their own private schools, right? And so what left is the public schools, which, again, and I mentioned about this a while ago, that you really needs to swim or sink. And so for a student, really all students given that opportunity, and I mentioned about technology, forget about it, right? When in my time in the 1980s, it's really not visible. And so for us here in the United States, it's very important to understand the wealth of technology resources we have, but we need to be equitable and we need to have that equity mindset. So an equity mindset, Ryan, I will not again put this in a piece of another plate, another to-do list. It's really again part of our Center for Diversity Leadership that we really need to deep dive and understand the true value and meaning and put them into action. Yeah. So for you, what are the one or two pieces that you really have to, the two to do things that cannot afford, in your building?
I think when I think of equity in education, it's really about creating opportunities. So I think as a leader, I strive every day to create an opportunity for everyone, right? To understand that everyone gets a chance to learn in whatever learning style or support that they need. But then also for my teachers too, like the one size fits all approach doesn't work for everyone. So this common language of equity is creating opportunities for people and everyone, students, staff, parents, to giving them a chance to learn in the best way that supports their learning styles. But then it also is about ensuring that students see people who are the same gender, same race, same ethnicity, have some similar backgrounds. And so for me, like this sense of belonging that I have been working on to create in my school community is to ensure that every student can see themselves in somebody in my building. I just was talking to someone yesterday of how proud I am to have 4 Black male teachers in my building who can connect with my Black boys in a way that I can't. Even as a Black woman, I'm not able to connect with my Black boys the same way my 4 male teachers are. Right. And so, and being able to see them not in the custodial role, right? Not just the PE teacher, but to see them as the special education chairperson, to see them as the 5th grade reading teacher, the 2nd grade math teacher, like the instrumental band teacher. That's huge, right? That's huge for my students because it's a picture of something that they can be, right? When society has told them something different. And, I think of this sense of belonging and making sure that students feel a part of the school community, that they feel a part of the climate. So not just celebrating the typical months of, nationalities, but making sure we are celebrating all of our families, all of our backgrounds, having, moving from, reimagining how we celebrate holidays, right? Being aware, consciously aware of the holiday season and what it looks like for students, right? Understanding when students, are fasting, how that has an impact on them in school. When students have are celebrating the holidays, but they have different backgrounds in their household, or even just the socioeconomic status. Students that are excited about Christmas because their families can buy them all of the things, and the students that, they're not looking forward to it because they're not sure what's going to be underneath of the Christmas tree. And so this sense of belonging that we have to create as leaders is making sure that, our students can see themselves, that there's someone that can connect with them, that we're impacting the community in a positive way. So, I think about my own education and how passionate I am as a leader because of some inequities that I experienced in my own education. And I remember a math teacher and a guidance counselor telling me that I would never be an educator. They told me that I would never go to these colleges that I wanted to go to. And I was very smart, right? I'm on GPA 3.7, 4.0 some years in advanced placement courses. But I was a Black girl that came from, the hood. And so for them, they couldn't see beyond my community, right? They could only see where I came from. And they didn't think that I could do anything more than that. And I remember running into one of those teachers when I was a first year principal. And it was at Panera Bread, Edgardo. And she looked at me, and I knew who she was. And she looked at me, and she was like, "Oh, what are you doing with yourself?" I was like, "I'm actually an educator." And she's like, "Oh, really? I never thought you would be a teacher." I was like, "Well, actually, I'm a principal." And, I think about as a principal who, we have the highest impact on a school community, and asking yourself, like, going back to your building tomorrow and saying, like, how am I creating a sense of belonging, for my students? Do some students experience our school climate differently than others? How do you create a sense of belonging?
Yes, thank you. Excuse me. I'm glad that you mentioned about the sense of belonging, because I think this is one piece that, for the most part, the DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and of course belonging. I think this is the one piece that is really sometimes left out, because I think, for one thing, it's probably the understanding that how can I create a sense of belonging in my building, in my classroom, if I'm a teacher. So I think the sense of belonging is, for some people, for some staff members, will think this as just be welcoming, right? The very basic. The sense of belonging is really putting, if we put it in action, is that understanding that every student have that personal baggage or luggage that they're carrying every day, whether you are an immigrant, whether you are, just came from Haiti, right? And
yes.
And whether our own locals, I remember when I was a principal in a community where 80% Native Americans. Each of them has their own, backpack. It's almost like, Ryan, we remember about the unpacking our backpack the first days of school, and I have done that when teachers, first days of PD, to unpack their backpack, what's in there, and let's see how can we modify and devise. Because you mentioned about as well the celebrations, like if we have a celebration for the month, and for the most part, we see it is in a shallow, like celebrations, bringing a Hispanic food, for example, but really doing that into a mindset of celebrating every day, into putting them into actions, into the curriculum, instruction, and assessment. And so I think moving that mindset as a whole will create, again, an understanding in a school, and then will impact the community. And if we can do this, and so that's why our work is very important, especially this, Center of Diversity Leadership, because it comprises that everything. And when we think of everything, it's not in one piece. It should be interconnected and in a one big plate, right? And so the celebration of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging should not be just putting one different places, but it's interconnected. Absolutely. I know you have done that, Ryan. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that I love that. I love that piece that you talked about, that emotional backpack, because, as leaders, we really need to help remove those barriers, for students, but also helping teachers understand that what is the common language of what it feels like when they come to our school community. right? Even if they don't look like somebody, like, do they still belong here? Right. And I think that is the most important piece, because as we're wrapping up, what happens when people have different definitions of equity, right? Like, that impacts the school community completely. And as school leaders, we must remove these barriers for our students to ensure their emotional backpack, like you talked about, Edgardo, doesn't hinder them from experiencing the highest level of learning possible. It is the opportunities that we can create for our students, so that no matter what home looks like, what their backgrounds are, what their nationalities are, how much money their parents make, what their sexuality is, or they're not sure of, like, that it doesn't hinder them from receiving the highest level of learning possible. So today we hope you walked away.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and thank you. And that is really providing equity for all students. Every student, every single student, every single learner in your building. And I'm glad you mentioned that. That what do you think will happen if, in a building full of teachers and staff, that they have their own definitions of equity? And I think this is a good PD to just unpack baby steps, right? And I'm sure I'm sure you have done this, Ryan, in your building, and so how does it impact the school community as a whole, right? As school leaders, we must remove barriers for our students to ensure that their, emotional backpack, and making it equitable. And you mentioned about the opportunities providing them that highest opportunities, that excellence, academic excellence, right? And so today, hopefully, our audience have that one piece to implement. Ryan, anything else as we wrap this up?
No, but we really just hope that you walked away today with a new outlook or perspective on how you can create a common language of what equity looks and feels like in your school community. Thank you so much for joining us, and stay tuned for more for the Center for Diversity Leadership.